So what I would essentially expect you to do is to be able to apply it to a situation. For example, a situation might be, here's a young lady who, in fact, grew up in a home that was physically abusive, and and now she winds up being pregnant. How do you explain, what would be your rationale as a psychologist? How would you explain the behavior?
Sir.
Yes.
You should point out the Christian behavior too, sir.
Well, repeat what you just said.
Out the Christian life, sir, about this matter.
Yeah, well, I would expect you to apply some Christian principles. For example, we always make statements like, but by the grace of God go we, therefore whoever have no sin, cast the first stone. What does that mean? Does that mean that we all can never be better? We can't change our life? Do we have to be governed by our past? So maybe that would be a better question. Are we governed by our past?
Okay.
That would be the question. How about that?
Yes,
and you can,
this is better because I didn't get the first one.
yeah. So I don't want yes and no answer. I want you to explain it. Are we governed by our past? So that would be the question. Are we governed by our past? And I expect you to use what the world is saying, what the psychologists might be saying, what Freud might be saying, but also to argue what's the Bible's position on that. For example, a good passage would be 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 11, which says, such were some of you. That means that these people changed their past. There's something else. For example, Jesus did say, except ye be born again, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. That passage is simply saying that you have to be transformed. So the gospel is saying that you can change. So you may have grown up in an abusive home. You may have been beaten. You may have been taught as a child to steal, to lie, to do all kinds of bad stuff because you see your parents doing it. So does that mean that that's how you're going to grow up to be also? You may have grown up in a situation where all the men have 3 and 4 girlfriends and nobody is ever faithful to anybody. There's another statement that says all men are dogs. Maybe another statement would be all men are dogs. Do you know what that's dogs? Do you know what that statement means? When a woman says that, all men are dogs.
Yes, sir.
I really know.
Yes, sir, I know.
Okay. It means that you can't trust men.
Yes.
They will be unfaithful. If he's married and another lady offers him sex, he will run and take it.
Yes, sir.
Okay? That's what that means.
Although it's dogs are loyal, sir.
Right. So, so statements like that are saying that, you people don't change. They can't change. That's what they are. Determinism. That's what that is about. So your job is to prove that that is true, or you can prove that that is wrong. That is not true.
So whether we choose to say that it is good or wrong, we must be able to support our position.
Right. It's not, you will not be, if you say it is true and you can prove it, you're good to go. You know, either way, it's not going to be based on a right and wrong answer.
Okay, sir.
So for example, there are people who believe that there is no God, and there are people who believe that there is a God. So the question is, can they prove it?
Yes, sir.
So, you know, for example, the existence of God really is a faith issue. You can't go prove it in a scientific lab. So it's both, it takes faith to believe.
Yes, sir.
So so you need to prove that, you know, that and come up with a workable answer for that. Of course, you're free to use the Bible to prove it or to disprove it. So that would basically be what the exam would be about. So there will be points given, of course, for attendance. You already have that, and the rest of the points will go for that you know. And what you'll do is you'll simply once you finish the paper, you'll just send it to me via email.
Oh, okay, sir. We can like start doing it from today and send it to the next Thursday.
Yeah. Yes. Well, no. You send it on the day of the exam.
Oh, okay, all right.
You follow? So you work on it now, though you start working now, and then just send it to me at that particular time. Now, there are 2 persons in this class.
I would say so, but normally it was supposed to be 4 of us.
4, and what happened to the 4? I've never really seen 4.
One of them never joined, but I think he should be like watching the videos on YouTube. And the next one joined last Thursday, but I do not see him today. I'm not sure.
He was in the class last Thursday?
Yes, sir. Brother Richard Roy.
Okay. So then you'll have to pass. Is that the one in Canada, I guess?
He was, but he's back in Jamaica now.
Okay. So make sure he gets that information in terms of what the test is about.
Okay, sir. Will do.
Right. And so, you know, like I said, you know, it's try to apply it to, because you guys eventually are going to be preachers. And so you have to be able to let people know that, yes, you may have had a bad life, but the power of the gospel is to reverse that, to change lives. And so you have no excuse. You have no excuse. You know, one of the passages you may want to explain is the one that says, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. People use it to show, yes.
What do you mean by bad life, sir?
Huh?
What do you mean by bad life?
Bad life meaning that they grew up in poverty. And so while they were growing up, you know, they had to steal in order to eat, to survive.
Yes, sir, but you have to work for that. Not the Bible cannot.
Well, I understand that, but I'm telling you that there are people out there who steal for their whole, that's all they do. They run around and steal. And if they don't get, they kill, you know, break into people's homes and steal, especially in Jamaica. I remember I was there when 2019, and I went down downtown Kingston. I came from the airport. I had a rental car, and I drove down downtown to buy a SIM card for my phone. And 2 police officers in army fatigue with machine guns pulled me over. I was walking on the street, stopped me, ordered me to take my watch off, ordered me to take my chain off without explaining to me why. And after I've done that, then he explained to me why. And he said, you will be killed. They will take your watch off, they'll take your gold chain off. I had an iPhone and I had it in my hand. And they explained to me that it was a dangerous thing to do and that I will be killed. And then they said to me, get in your vehicle, follow us. And they took me uptown, close to the school up there, Kingston 7. They took me up there and then showed me a safe Digicel store to go and get my SIM card. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what I'm saying, I was lucky that day because the police officers were very kind because they were watching me and they knew the way I was carrying my phone and had my watch on and had my chain around my neck. They knew that I wasn't from Jamaica. I mean, I wasn't, in that area. I shouldn't be there doing that. And so they warned me. So what I'm saying is that that's what I mean when I say bad people. So obviously, those people grew up that way. Their character isn't good. So they'll steal. There are men in Jamaica who have 3 and 4 women. And it's no big deal. And they have children all over the place. So the question is, how do you explain that kind of a behavior? Where did they learn that from? Why is it so acceptable for them? There are some other people who will, they may have a girlfriend, but they'll hide it. They don't want anybody to know because there's something in them that says that they shouldn't be doing that. But there are other people, they want you to know that they have 3 girlfriends. Because to them, it's a pride, it's a sense of pride. So the question is, where did they get that kind of a character from? Where did it come from? Freud is saying that that's from childhood. They were raised, they witnessed that, they were taught that, and now they believe that that's acceptable. The gospel is saying, yes, that may be true, but with Christ and the application of the blood of Christ can change your life and you can be a better person. The interesting thing is, you do have people in the church who have been there for years. You probably have to be very careful not to let them be around the contribution because they put some in their pocket. But they're Christians and they've been in the church for years, right?
Yes, sir.
So the question is, can the gospel really change people's life? Does people get better? Why do you? And so that's why if you catch that person, he may say to you, well, we all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Are you telling me you never sinned? Okay, that might be his explanation. And people use that to justify their behavior.
Yes, sir.
And what that is, that's what the psychologist is saying. He's saying determinism. It says what? It's not your fault. You were raised that way. So in a lot of criminal cases where when the young man, you may not have remembered that, went into the school with a machine gun and shoot all of those children in school, kill a lot of people. And the defense attorney argued that's why, because he was abused in his home, saw his father abusing his mother. And therefore, that's why he did that. Therefore, he said he is what? He's mentally disturbed. Okay. So because he pleaded that he was mentally disturbed, therefore he got a pass because it wasn't his fault. Whenever someone says the reason you do the crime is because you're mentally disturbed, you were not in your right mind, what they're giving you a pass. They're saying you didn't know what you were doing because of all these following things. But the Bible says, though, that we shall all stand before the judgment seat of God to give an account for what we've done. It didn't say because Adam sinned, therefore you're going to get a pass on the judgment day, because you were born a sinner and you inherit Adam's sin, therefore you can, you'll be given a pass. So that's kind of where the argument is going.
So when you say that, sir, this person is going to get a pass, so they are not going to arrest him and put him in prison?
But no, they won't. They'll put him in a hospital.
Oh, okay.
See, they put him in a hospital because they're saying that because of the life under which he grew up as a child, he was damaged. And because he was damaged, let's not punish him, let's fix him.
Oh.
And in the United States, once they do that, it takes 2 doctors to say that you're okay. So once they give you medicine, and you could be out in 2 years. You could go free. But it takes a good lawyer to be able to argue that point. But poor people don't have those good lawyers. There was a guy in Jamaica, well, it wasn't, as a Jamaican guy, McPherson, that in the United States, he went on the subway, took a machine gun and the train and killed, I forget how many people he killed. There's still some people crippled from those shots that he did. But he was crazy. He was literally crazy. Okay. And because he was a Black guy, and because he had killed a lot of very high-powered people, and he said he wanted to defend himself. And the judge allowed him to defend himself. The reason that they allowed him to defend himself, they did not want him to go to a crazy house. They wanted him to go to jail for the rest of his life. And he was so crazy. He was right here in my tongue, actually in the courtroom here. He was so crazy that he went up to the people and asked one of the lady who survived, "Did you see me shoot you?" They said, "Yes." And the lady was crippled in a wheelchair, okay, from his shooting. And he was like, that's how crazy he was. And everybody thought it was a mockery. They should never have allowed that to happen. But like I said, he was a Jamaican, he was a Black guy. He killed a lot of white people on the train. And as a matter of fact, the judge allowed him to defend himself. He died in jail, actually. I think they killed him, actually. He died in jail.
Okay.
So, but he was a Jamaican, actually. So that's how had he been maybe a white person, or had he been a person with money, he would not have been allowed to really defend himself. He would have got a lot, but he was in fact crazy though. This guy was in fact crazy and should not have gone to prison. He should have gone to a psychiatric facility. And he could have still been in a psychiatric facility for 2 years, for life, because it takes 2 doctors to say that you are sane, not 1. So chances are he was in fact crazy, by the way, and was on medication before the shooting, was diagnosed as a schizophrenic patient before the shooting and all of that. It's just that he had stopped taking his medicine. And because he stopped taking his medicine. So someone would have argued that he wasn't responsible for all these people that he killed, because his brain was not, and I'm assuming if he had a good attorney, they would have gone back into his family life and his family history and be able to prove that, might have argued that he was, beaten, whatever happened at home when he was growing up, and therefore he was severely damaged. Therefore, we can't punish him. So that's, yes.
For this example of this man, sir, as you human, you can find a way to set this man free, or to do not make him guilty about his deed. But
Yes.
now, how God will react for this man on the judgment day? If you human, you will try to
I think you'd have to give an account. For example, we had a case recently where the husband was beating his wife all the time. And one night when he was sleeping, the wife took a gun and killed him. She was able to get off. They argue that she was beaten and she was afraid that, but she could have walked away. She could have ended the marriage. She could have left, but she didn't. But her lawyer argued that it was what the diagnosis is learned helplessness, meaning that you now subject yourself to your person who is beating and abusing you. That's a psychological term you will hear. Learn helplessness. That's a woman who is in a situation where the husband is beating her whenever he's drunk, whenever if she burned the food, whatever. She gets beaten, sometimes to the point where she probably even go to the hospital. And when she's discharged from the hospital, she goes right back to him. And the term they use is learn helplessness. And a lot of women, especially poor women who have no means of survival financially, may find themselves in abusive relationships and get stuck in those relationships. And then they get abused in those relationships. And people looking in was wondering, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she do this? She's a free man. And that's where it comes in again, free moral, freedom of choice, right? We all have the choice but there are some people, because of the situation they find themselves in, can't leave. So yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to say that sometimes we always say that, or we often say that it's because of love, like the female love the man, and that's why she doesn't want to leave.
That would then not be love, would it? But the problem is, though, if you look at those people, though, you may find that there are things in the woman's background in her life that she's been damaged in some way. And therefore, because she was damaged as a child, she wind up in dysfunctional situation. She doesn't have the ability to make right choices, to select appropriate relationships. And people like that get into one bad relationship, one after the other. Even if this man died, she wind up going into another relationship that is going to wind up abusing her as well. And that's where Freud and those guys would argue about this determinism factor, which means that there are things in your history that is driving your behavior and the choices that you're making. The point is, there's the power of the gospel has the ability in it to transform the individual and turn them into a very powerful, healthy, wise individual to make good choices that are going to be in their best interest and in the interest of their children and in the interest of the community at large. So for example, a person who may be who may hate a person because the person's color of the person's skin is white. And someone may say, because he learned that. Or a person who may hate a person's because of the color of their skin, maybe he's Black. Or a person who may hate a person who is of a different country. For example, when the bombing of the World Trade Center, a lot of Muslim people were treated very badly. And to still this day, people are very suspicious. People of different race are being treated a certain way. In Black communities, a white person may be treated a certain way. Or in a predominantly white community, rather, I should say, a Black person may be treated a certain way. So people carry these baggages that causes, racism is part of that. You don't grow up, I don't think a person grew up to be a racist. I think they learn it in their home. And that's where we're beginning to figure out whether or not the gospel has the power. If you think about Peter, for example, remember Peter in the Bible?
Yes, sir.
You remember when God asked him to go to take the gospel to the Gentile Cornelius,
Yes,
remember
sir.
what remember he refused, right?
Yes, sir.
That he can't subject himself to be that way. Now, on the day of Pentecost, remember when Peter was preaching?
Yes, sir, I do.
And in that sermon, he said that he quoted from Joel, and he says that God says he'll pour his spirit out on all flesh. And Peter quoted that passage in his sermon. Later, when God asked him to go to a Gentile person to take the gospel, he said, never. Yeah, you can't do this. It's beneath me to do that. So the point here is, you notice how Peter's past was governing his action. Follow?
Yes, sir.
So the question then becomes, at what point did the power of the gospel really transform Peter's life? Certainly it wasn't on Pentecost, even though he preached that wonderful sermon. So we have to assume that somewhere along the line, he must have learned his lesson. And someone will say, because in Acts chapter 11, when Peter was explaining after Cornelius' conversion, he was explaining how he now realized that God had accepted them. Remember that? Yes. Later down the road, though, in the book of Galatians, remember? When he went to visit and when he was eating with the Gentiles, Paul and Barnabas, they were all together eating together. And when he looked, he saw some people coming from Jerusalem, from James. And you remember he withdrew because he didn't want them to see him eating with the Gentiles?
Yes, sir.
And Peter and Paul, remember Paul argued with him and said, how can you're a hypocrite. How can you do this? Remember that?
Yes,
and
sir.
And he says that the argument, he says that Barnabas even joined Peter at that particular point. So here you see where a person's past is in fact affecting some of their choices and some of the decisions that they're making.
Sir.
Yes.
As we are, going through this particular lesson, like determinism, when you were, when you go with certain character, and it is difficult for you down the line, to change it. You still tend to live the same way that you were. And we are saying overall that there is no change that can be made. Since you were like a thief or I don't know, whatever, you are not going to be able to change. So this reminds me of something that I've studied in literature, in the French language. I can't remember the two persons because they have made like contradicted, like opposited theory. One of them was Saint Thomas, and Saint Thomas and another one. They were saying that, there is a matter of destiny. If you were born to be poor, nothing can be changed. Nothing.
It would always be, yes.
You will still be a poor. If you were, born to be successful, you will be successful. So does this actually link with determinism?
Yeah. Yes, it is exactly what it is. As a matter of fact, one of the guys who said that was, you told me his name, how to pronounce his name. Jean-Jacques
Rousseau.
Yeah, yes, he said that.
Yeah.
That what you just quoted, that was his argument. See,
Yes.
he also doesn't believe in God. Follow? He
Yes.
believed that everything, it is what it is. Okay. One of the Jehovah Witness also teach that when you die, you're done. You're like the dog, you have no soul, you finish. In their doctrine, they kind of teach that. So, so you are correct. Those are the two things. And a lot of what's going on in the world today, as a matter of fact, Bob Marley, which is one of the famous Jamaica reggae singer that died, he has a song that says something where we say that heaven is where you do your stuff, but he says you have to get it here. I don't remember what the song says, but he was hinting at that same idea, that why live for heaven when you're not going to get there? Get what you can now in this world. And as he was arguing that the way that you oppress people is by telling them, don't react, wait till you get to heaven. But he's really saying you need to get it here now, So there are a lot of people today who believe what you're saying. That there is no, that's why you get all the pleasure you can, get everything that you can, get all the monies that you can, and be happy now. Okay. Don't plan. James says, James reminded us when he says, look at I forget what it says. It says that, I can't even remember it now, but it was in James. James talks about that. When he talks about the vapor, the cloud and so on and so on and so on, was talking about those people who have no substance to them, actually. But that's a very good argument. And that's something that you may want to put in your paper. You could talk about that. You may not necessarily remember who said it, and you don't have to, but that's part of the argument.
Yes, sir. But what I'm thinking though, as we are speaking about determinism, we have seen that it is all a matter of choice, because every day in life you are going to face situations where you have to make a choice.
Exactly. And that's Socrates. Remember, we saw that. Socrates said that.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
But I want, go ahead.
Yeah, so it is all the decisions that you are making that is, changing your life over time. It is not really to me a matter of destiny or a matter where you cannot change. It is all about the choice that you are making.
Right. But just so you know, part of the Baptist theology, part of the Baptist doctrine is that certain people are already chosen to go to heaven. And there's nothing they can do about that, no matter how much sin you practice. If you're on that list to go to heaven, you're going to go to heaven because you've already been chosen. Predestination is the term used. That's how they interpret the word predestination.
Yes, sir.
So the Baptists believe that. Well, now, I don't think all do. Sometimes I want to be very careful. Sometimes when I say that, but the main theology, the main doctrine says, and that's the whole idea, that there's nothing you can do to fall from grace if your name is on the list. If you've already been chosen, so there are those who have already been chosen, and there are those who have not been chosen. The question is, how do you know which one of us? But that's the same idea there. And that's why, for them, their plan of salvation is a little different. Because they believe that people already been chosen to go to heaven. And they use passages like, well, here's a passage that, remember it says between Esau and Jacob, Jacob and Esau, the two brothers. Remember, they were told that one would be a leader even before he was born, right? And they use that passage to show that Esau had no choice. He was set up that way. Pharaoh, for example, another example is Pharaoh. Pharaoh wanted to deliver the people, but God had hardened his heart. God had worked on him. He was already decided he couldn't. And people may argue that someone had to betray Christ. Poor Judas, his name came up, and he was on the list to do that. He had no choice. So that's how they use the argument to say that, it is what it is. And some people, and they even use it to the point where, some people are rich, the Bill Gates of the world. His children and his grandchildren would always be wealthy. What people seem to forget, that once upon a time, Bill Gates was poor. Never went to college. And he did, he had some technical skills and he started a program and but his children now obviously wouldn't have to work for the rest of their life if they don't want to. So people use that to show, some people.
And that's why, sir, I like to say that at the end of the day, all these are like related, because The truth is, as we are analyzing, we would always tend to say, well, since so and so was born, he always wanted to be a doctor, and today he's a doctor and stuff. They are going to say that that's what he was predestined for. You
Right.
know?
And that's the word, yes, that's what it is. But I'm saying that you have to be very careful when you're using those terms, especially when you're preaching, because what you're saying to people that they really can't change, that they've already been chosen for a certain path, and that's what it is. But Paul makes it very clear in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 11. And he lists a whole bunch of things, bad stuff though. And he says, such were some of you. Meaning, and that's one of the argument with homosexual, for example. If you look at that list, homosexual was in that list. And Paul says, you can't inherit the kingdom of God. But then later in the next verse, it says, but such was some of you. You were homosexuals, you were murderers, you were thieves, you were all these things. But now you're not.
Yes, sir.
You've changed. So this whole idea of predestination doesn't work. Or Freudian approach to his psychological process doesn't really work. It doesn't pan out. It runs counter to the blood of Jesus, because something happened in the new covenant. And what happens in the new covenant is the application of the blood of Christ, the sacrifice of Christ, which puts us back where we should have been in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve had a perfect situation. But because they exercised their free will, it got them into trouble. And so Christ, the second Adam, restore all of that. And now we have this, but we have to exercise our free will though. Christ doesn't force himself on you. You have to exercise your free will to accept him, and then to allow his guidance and the Holy Spirit that he puts in you with the word, with the word of truth. Those combination enable you to lift yourself out of that, to live a higher life and a different life from the rest of the world. So you can change. The Holy Spirit.
To renew our spirit.
Exactly. I think that's Ephesians chapter 4, verses 23, I think it says that. But that's exactly what it is. But I think though, a lot of so-called Christian don't really get to that place where their lives are totally transformed. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 1, it says, do not be conformed to the world, but be ye transformed, right? So a lot, and that's a daily thing though. That's a growth process. So tomorrow you ought to be a little better than you are today. If you're, because remember, God is internally colonizing and changing the individual. That's why, prayer becomes so important. Bible reading, studying the scriptures, you reading, praying, and all of that, because it draws you closer to the truth. And therefore the implement of the truth becomes, Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, right? But if you notice in verse 26, it says, and the Son will set you free. So, remember Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yes, sir.
So the truth really is about Christ. And that's where the secret really is in terms of the change. So, but I think we need to have the next class now. But remember what the assignment is. If I were you, I would start working on it. And then when we have the next class, maybe if you have any questions on it, any problems with it, you're stuck with it, then maybe you could kind of like tweak it there. But I wouldn't wait for the next class. I'll probably have that thing ready to go. Okay, sir. As a matter of fact, let me put it to you this way. Whenever you finish it, submit it. Don't wait for the 6th.
All right, sir. But I've done that for the last term, and sir, I was asked to send it after a while because because I didn't get it, but this time I look for it. I'll make sure. And what you need to do, you need to send me a text and WhatsApp. I don't
Verify
have
that
your WhatsApp number, sir.
you don't have WhatsApp?
I don't have your WhatsApp number.
Okay, my WhatsApp number is what it is. Okay, man. Let me go find my phone.
No, second phone.
Let me find my phone. Okay, all right, let me see what my phone is here. Okay. How do you find your WhatsApp number? Okay, setting, okay. All right, setting, all right. Okay, my number is 876 355 8224. That's my WhatsApp number.
All right, 876-355-8224.
Yes,
Okay, sir.
it's a Jamaican number.
All right, sir.
Okay, so that's what you should do, okay? And but remember, I mean, you know, like I like the two illustration you were trying to remember from in French. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
So do the best you can.
All right, sir.
Okay, so let me try to get out of this. So I think let's have another class coming up.
Okay, sir. All right.
Okay, leave.